Please welcome Joseph Scott.
Yay. Thank you very much. Whoa. Yeah, I was just talking to Cliff on the phone with the gentleman in the back, and the bar is set very high. Actually, Cliff and I started speaking, I think he started in 93, and then I started speaking in 95, so I know the gentleman quite well. And when our son joined the business, I sent my son to talk to him too, so we have a lot of mutual respect, and I will try to do the topic justice. I guess the first thing I'd like to start with, and just want to let you know, I usually walk back and forth a lot, but because of where the cameras are placed, if I go over and write something over there, I'm going to have to go behind the screen. So I'm not hiding from you guys or anything like that. But the first thing that I like to know is that whenever I go to a session, I'm always interested. There's something that I want to know. And what I'd like to start with is to try to make sure, because we only have 45 minutes together, and I just want to make sure that if you have something that you're just dying to know about this topic, that I make sure I cover it off. So does anybody have any questions or comments? Just something they want to make sure that I talk about or cover. Yes, sir.
Measurement tools.
Perfect. That's actually in here. That's excellent. That's excellent. Yeah, I got notification, Chantal. We just fell in love over email. And I was really excited to see her. She said, hey, can you help us out? I think, was that yesterday? Something like that. So this is a presentation that I put together to help you out. So anyway, measurement tools, what else? What else you got? Good enough. Good enough. Off we go. So the things that we're going to cover, of course you can read these faster than I can talk about it, but we're going to cover, I always like to start off with a definition, just to make sure we're talking about the right thing. Then importantly, how to measure things, but even more importantly than that, what should you actually measure? And then I'm going to talk a little bit about the things that you measure have to come from someplace, and that's usually from our clients. And then there's something here that's kind of difficult to do, but how do you measure return on investment from promotional products? Because I know more and more, I think a lot of you just sell promotional products, which is wonderful, and I don't want, just because we have transitioned from being a promotional products organization to more of an ad agency that also sells promotional products, in no way do I want you to change your business. If you're doing great the way you're doing, we just happen to head that direction. And I think that's the reason why we've gotten pretty good about this. And then the last piece, which I found totally changed our business about 15 years ago, is this process. The last line there, OER, MTV. So anyway, the whole concept of marketing, I remember back from B school, there were like the 4 Ps. And the first 3, usually as marketing professionals, we're usually not that involved in the first 3. Coming up with the product, coming up with the price, and then how do you get the product or service to where your client is. Now, fortunately, as we've matured as an agency and as we've gotten to work closely, and Mr. Cooper talked about trust, and those of you, if you didn't have a chance to listen to Mr. Cooper speak, top-notch guy. This is the first time I've met him. But he talked about trust. And that's the thing that we've found, is that as we've started, like usually if you're selling promotional products, usually the event has been scheduled, and it's in a week, and then they're done there, right? And then there's a huge scramble. But as you develop trust with your clients, they actually start kind of, even when you ask them, they'll actually start telling you things. So that's the thing that's important. But typically what we run into is the things that we need to measure is the promotional strategy itself. And depending upon your relationship with the client, your part of the promotional strategy could be supplying promotional products for a trade show. It could be an incentive program or something like that. So that's where we're starting here. In our world, the types of things that our clients are really, really interested in, and I should step aside here and tell you about how we keep our jobs, is that when we talk about what we do for a living, we talk about getting customers for our clients. And I have a little slide on that later on, why I think telling people exactly what you do for a living is really important. But for us, it's really key that, quite frankly, we're responsible for this. We're responsible for lead generation. And then we're also responsible for helping, in some instances, our clients' sales forces and their channels of distribution to move these people through. So there's a lot of different things to measure. Most people are interested in sales and gross margin, but if you're really going to serve your clients, the farther upstream you can get, the more important you are to them. And what we've seen is our biggest client, they showed up on our doorstep randomly and they needed some trade show shirts. And that was 7 years ago, and you know what? I was happy to sell them 12 shirts. Big thumbs up on that. But then as they said, well, they looked around our office and they're going, we don't have a showroom. So they're looking around our office going, what do you guys really do? And we started telling them about getting customers. And now you guys probably live in a bigger world than I do, but we bill them $20,000 a month for our time in 7 years. And it started with selling them a handful of shirts. That's really exciting. So, for me, you guys probably have bigger deals than that, but for me, that's really huge. So anyway, when you talk about measuring results, how do you measure them? And the level of sophistication of measurement of advertising or direct mail or whatever it happens to be to our clients runs all the way to a dentist who is a tenant in our building. They have a Post-it note by the phone. And when a new patient comes in, they say, well, how'd you find out about us? And there's, advertising, promotional. So at the end of the month, they have a Post-it note with little check marks in it. And that's sophisticated enough for our dentist. We have other clients where we've actually helped install very, very simple customer relationship management systems that track people through the process. So, we have the whole gamut. But what I would suggest for you is if you're not tracking this on behalf of your clients, I'd start off with the Post-it note thing. And here's something that's really cool about getting involved in the measurement of marketing is that a lot of times they smaller businesses, and we call on $1, $2, $3, $4 million companies. So we don't talk to huge companies because it's quite frankly, I'm not that good of a salesperson and it takes too long. But we work with really small companies, and a lot of times they're not tracking it. And if you can introduce this very, very simple concept, then something really beautiful happens. Not only do they start trusting you more, but I would suggest that you try this. Ask them to send you a spreadsheet, probably from QuickBooks, that shows all the advertising expenditures that they had for last year. And you take a look at that and sort it by payee, subtotal it, and then sort it from smallest subtotal to highest. And we did this with our dentist who's in our building. And there was, literally it was placemats at the American Legion, $300. Hey, did you get any patients off of that? No. So we kind of went through this list. We found some duplication. We looked at newspaper. We looked at all the advertising, and he goes, Joe, I'm spending $4,000 or $5,000 a month, and I'm not getting anything. Because he's a dentist, and he told me, he said, Joe, I went to dental school. I'm not a marketing guy. So the really, really short story on this, all of a sudden, we freed up $4,000 a month that was going to people who weren't me. And we were able to turn that around into a $4,000 a month direct mail program. And you know what? All of us in this room can do that. And I'm not a genius. The thing that, you have those sales calls where just stuff comes out of your mouth and the client's just nodding your head, and then you leave and you're in your car, you're shaking and you're going, what just happened? For me, like a $1,000 mug order, that's a big deal. I get excited about that. But then by asking the right questions and talking about measurement, all of a sudden I went from being Joe the pen guy to like some superior being to Joe the pen guy. And all of a sudden, it was $48,000 worth of business that just kind of showed up. And that was 8 years ago, and quite frankly, I still scratch my head about it. So the cool thing is that when you're measuring results, there's a lot of different ways to do it. And if you get into, like, I think maybe some of us may be doing some email for ourselves or maybe for our clients. There's a lot of different mechanisms that you can use to do that. Now, measuring marketing activities depends a lot on how your customer, or you, for that matter, go to market. For my company, I'm the only salesperson, so I just kind of like go direct. Well, actually, I work for my wife, so I guess my wife is sales management. I'm the direct sales force, and those are the customers. Now, you probably have customers that have salespeople. And it's very, very interesting to find out how are they measuring their marketing. And a lot of times they're not. Smaller companies, it's like, oh, if guys are hitting their quotas, that's really great. When it gets really interesting, and this is the area that we have concentrated on just more by accident, is a situation, and you talk about how crazy it is to be a supplier, where you have, in our industry, we have no control over the sales force, like those of us who are distributors. We're not on the payroll. They have no control over us. We have no idea what we're going to sell. That is where there's a lot of opportunities if you can help your clients in a situation like that, because you have somebody at the home office, and then they're selling to distributors who may have a sales force. So the person with the product a lot of times doesn't even know who the actual customer is. So that's actually a model of our industry pretty much on the right-hand side. But the more complex it is, the bigger the opportunity is for you. And the thing that's really weird about this is that when I think about how much of my time I gave away the first 8 years, and you're doing the product searches, you're doing creative and stuff like that. I was giving it away, and what happened is a client of mine who had that situation, we sat down and had this conversation. I was asking questions. What are your objectives? Wait a minute, you're Joe the pen guy. Why are you asking me about objectives? And I said, well, I just got my MAS, so now I can bill for my time, right? But you start asking, I didn't know what to do with it, But you start asking those questions, and then all of a sudden, it's really, really interesting. If you're working with a person at a small business, the attitude really changes, and I'll talk a little bit more about that. But when, just be curious, and you start asking these questions, and all of a sudden it's like, well, the only questions you used to ask me is, how many do you want? What's your budget? How many colors are in the logo? And when do you need them? And now you're asking me about my objectives. What's going on? You start having this conversation, you're going to change the relationship that you're going to have with your clients. Now, you guys are all familiar with the sales funnel because we all do this ourselves. And just from a terminology standpoint, we talk about, you not only do you need to measure like sales, but it's really important to know how's the funnel working. And these are things that happen from marketing, different marketing efforts. Now, this is how we set up with our company. And when we first started, what we would do is we would do direct mail. So that would be the promotional products. And one of the things that's the most valuable thing you can do when you're helping somebody with marketing is to have a direct impact on getting people who are unknown to your client to identify themselves. Because the thing is, it drives me nuts. I mean, when I'm walking through an airport or there's people on the airplane, how many of those people could be clients of mine? I have no idea because they don't feel the need to identify themselves to me. Well, that's where we started. And then as our clients started asking us, well, I had a chiropractor yesterday. I play football or soccer. You guys call it football, the way it should be called. And I'm a keeper. And one of the guys in the team, I've known him for 2 years, and he says, now, Joe, do you do that website stuff? and you sell promotional products, right? Well, the bottom line is he just said, I need a website and I need that Facebook, that Facebook thing, I need some help. So because we were asking questions, our clients started asking for things that we didn't do at the time. And the interesting thing about it is what we've been able to do is we've been able to surround this getting unknown people to contact our clients utilizing these things. Now, I am in no way suggesting that you immediately get into that business, because it took us about 5 years to get to the point where everything was in-house. But the weird thing, how this whole website thing happened, which is a beautiful marketing method, is I got a call from a client of mine that I was selling promotional products to, and he said, Joe, I'm a lot younger than he is, and he goes, Joe, I've decided our website sucks. I'll take you to lunch and let's talk about websites. And I'm going, that's okay. And then, what are your objectives? And the bottom line was, he goes, you know what? I want you to do a website. And I said, well, what do you think? He says, probably $35,000 or $40,000. Can you help me? Can you get me a website for that amount? And I said, as my dad called this the concierge answer, you know what? Let me see what I can do. You want Super Bowl tickets today for the Super Bowl today? Let me see what I can do. So anyway, I knew some people that did websites. So I called the guy up. The really, really short story is he did a fantastic job. My client was happier than heck. And now I knew how to sell a website. And fast forward 2 years, that guy, his name is Kevin McHale, he's our lead web designer, graphic designer dude. And he started off as a subcontractor. And that's the beautiful thing about this. You don't have to hire people. There are tons of people around who do these things, and they love working from home, and they probably don't want to be an employee. So that's how we kind of accidentally grew our company. And everybody that we've hired started off as a subcontractor, which is a great way to interview people. And we made the decision to let our subcontractors interact directly with our customers because we trust our subcontractors. So anyway, I'm not saying that you have to do this. Just start asking those questions.
So,
yes, sir.
Are they on the payroll now?
Yeah. Yes. We have 6 employees, and we started off with me, and then I pretty much ran the company into the ground in the first week and knew I was in trouble. We had a lot of clients, and as I digress, of course, but I figured out, well, who's really smart, really hardworking, honest, intelligent, and will work for free? Well, that was my wife, Katie. And the first thing she did is, she's an engineer. We got left brain, right brain thing going on here. And she immediately goes out and hires 2 people from the babysitting co-op. Because she goes, Joe, you got to get your whatever out in the field and selling. So that was in 93. 96, we were at $1 million. 97, we were at $2.5 million. So I married up. Good for me. Good for me. Yes, I think we all did. Didn't we? So anyway, a lot of people ask me, how the heck can you calculate return on investment of a promotional product? And that's a really, really good question. And if you're giving stuff away, in my humble opinion, you're not respecting our medium. Promotional products are an advertising medium, and they should be treated with the same amount of respect as you would treat a radio spot, TV spot, or something like that. Now, there's a couple of, and these are no-brainers to you guys, but I wanted to put it in here because the audience for this content is probably going to be broader than the people in the room here. But there are ways you can do things, and it's very similar to print advertising. Usually if you want to track an ad in print advertising, you'll have like a special website or a special phone number or a special email address to get people to contact you. And the interesting thing about this is when you think about all the different promotional products that, 800,000 promotional products or something like that? One of the things that I think is really important in it, we have to train our customers. A lot of times what will happen is our customers are not thinking about the message they're sending, the target audience, and they've already made a decision on a vehicle. You know, Joe, I want 1,000 coffee mugs to hand out at a trade show. Okay, who are you going to be giving them to? What kind of message do you want to have? And when you take them backwards, I mean, as much as I'd like to take the order right away, I made it a habit to ask those questions because I want to get back to the objective. And then, I'll show you, there's a kind of an interesting worksheet that I have. But there are ways to do this. And so please, you know, you got to be, whenever somebody says like, I can't say the T and T word, or some people call it swag. Before I used to use the terminology, but I just realized that it's an advertising medium. So this is kind of like I was telling you about our dentist, Dr. Mike, big, bearded, hunting, fishing, just like a man's man. And we talked a little bit about, you know, how we came up with this $4,000 a month. It just kind of came out of nowhere. And I was kind of nervous. I was spending $4,000 of Dr. Mike's hard-earned money. Actually, I think I paid for some of that, actually, because I usually am in his chair at least twice a year. Because I was kind of nervous. I didn't know how it was going to work. And we went through this process of, okay, what's your objective? His objective, he wanted 20 new patients a month. Great. Well, fortunately, I had prepared for the call because I would think the Canadian Dental Association and the American Dental Association probably came up with the same number, where it would probably be, I would say, a new patient, lifetime value of a new dental patient would probably be 14,000 Canadian. And all of a sudden, he didn't care. Well, I said, oh man, so you're talking about $250,000 Canadian a month in lifetime value if this works. How much would you be willing to spend? Well, we came up with this 4,000. So anyway, we did the typical, you know, there's all sorts of great companies. They'll do the postcard for you. You get them the list. They'll spray the list on there and stick the magnet on there. And what it was, I don't have a picture of it, but it said, sometimes going to the dentist bites. And there was a little kind of a chunk taken out of the corner of the card. And we sent the thing out, and I crossed my fingers and toes. And 4 days later, Dr. Mike comes into my office, and he walks 100. He comes into my office, and he's got one of his cards with him, and I'm just going, I didn't know what was going to happen. And he goes, Joe, a guy came into my office yesterday with one of these cards, and it was a $15,000 microdental implant case. And then he did his happy dance. And and he's a big dude, and he was doing the happy dance. And you know, I didn't know if my head was going to be separated from my body or whatever. And the cool thing about is that, and he said, you know what? I know it works. Just keep doing it, and then I'll have my people take care of it. So this was, you know, talk about measurement and return on investment. And the interesting thing, because we had this elaborate system put together to track this, and now it's a Post-it note. And then Dr. Mike comes in every once in a while with some more postcards and waves them around and says $28,000, you know. So anyway, so measurement can be very informal, but it's really, really important that we measure, because what typically happens is when things are working and it starts looking easy, our clients kind of forget how cool we are. And we might lose them, or they might start doing it themselves. So another cool thing about measuring things on behalf of your client is you get to get in there. We have some clients, we meet with them every week. Some clients, we only meet with them every month. But when you're measuring objectives and showing the value that you're bringing to the table, you get to remind them every month or every week or something like that. So that was pretty darn exciting. And I've got some actually even more exciting stuff coming next. Yes, ma'am.
So I'm loving this, and I'm curious how you transition those product-driven sales to adding that consultative approach and kind of easing them into, well, now you're kind of paying a monthly retainer and here's what's involved.
Yeah,
So how
that's
do
a
you
nice
take
pun,
them-
by the way.
So how do you take them from, just thinking that product to my advice is no longer free? And here is how we're going to help.
Cool. I will, for the folks at home, I will replay that. The essence of your question, and please correct me if I'm wrong, is how do you transition, let's say, product-oriented customers to objective-oriented customers so you can get paid for your time and make more money? By the way, he didn't ask how many postcards we were sending out. He didn't care what the magnet cost. He didn't care what each postcard cost. He had that $250,000 Canadian in his mind. That's what he was buying. So to answer the question, quite frankly, when I approached him, I tried to sell him $300 worth of baby toothbrushes, and I could not do it. And here's why. And I'm going to talk about, I have another session after this one. The reason is that every single patient of his either sold promotional products or knew somebody who sold promotional products. So, and it got to the point where he just started like putting more stuff in people's mouths when he was working on them so they wouldn't talk to him and try to sell him stuff. And for those of you who aren't gonna, you get all bummed out and from listening to me talk, and you won't come to the next session, so I'll give you this idea, is the thing that changed it is that there's this thing called a agency of record agreement, and this is getting to bill for your time. All this is, it's a little paragraph that says if anybody calls you or your employees to try to sell you advertising, promotional products, marketing services, send them to us. And when I showed him the agreement, literally, he ripped the pen out of my hand and actually kind of cut me a little bit on my hand. And he signed the thing and he goes, "Do you know how much freaking time is wasted in my office by salespeople selling what you sell, Joe, coming in and trying to sell us stuff?" And I was dumb. I didn't. And when I thought about it, I went, wow. I said, well, how much time do you think it cost you? And he said, it cost me thousands of dollars a month. And now, I said, give me some of your business cards. Now, when somebody comes in to sell me something, I'll go, hey, our ad agency takes care of it. And we became an ad agency that day. Now, here's what's even crazier, is that, and usually what'll happen is most of the people won't call us. Those that do, we bill our client for the time it takes for us to talk to our competitors. Because, my time is not as valuable as his time. So that was really, really weird. And so for him, I started off billing my time because I couldn't sell him the 300 baby toothbrushes. But our biggest client who bought the shirts, I started asking me, I said, well, what kind of trade shows do you go to? And they started talking about it. And one happened to be Graphics of the Americas that's in Miami. And I said, well, do you have anybody in your office who speaks Spanish? And he said, no. Well, I speak Spanish. I'm fluent in Spanish. Oh, can we hire you to go and translate at the trade show? And of course I said yes. And it's like, what do I get paid? I don't even know what I get paid. Anyway, I think it's like $4 a minute or something like that is what I charge clients. But for him, he's spending $50,000 to go to a trade show. And it's U.S., but it's Mexico, South America, and so forth. And it got to the point after about an hour, I wasn't even translating anymore. I was just selling. And this has nothing to do with my sales ability and more with the strength of the products. But I sold like $250,000 worth of stuff. People had like cash. And I'm not going to tell you the specific South American country they were coming from. But it worked out pretty good because I spoke Spanish. So anyway, so they went from the, looking at the shirts to, oh, we don't have anybody who can speak Spanish. And all of a sudden he's going, oh my gosh, he didn't really care. I mean, I was nice to him and charged him a decent amount. But the thing is, let's take your average client who you've been doing business with for forever. How do you transition? And the guy who gave me this idea is like, all the good ideas aren't mine. That's why I credit people for them. The guy's Ed Johnson. He was from Walter Cribbins, and I think he's retired now. But I was talking, he was at one of my sessions, and he said, Joe, I've got the idea how you can transition your existing product customers to bill them for time. Is what you do is you immediately, on your invoices, put 2 hours product research, no charge. 1 hour logo design, no charge. And then at the bottom, you say, as of January 1st, 2000 whatever, or March, or whatever you want to do, we'll be billing our services at a rate of X. Pick whatever you want. And here's what I was expecting all sorts of angry phone calls and people freaking out. But Ed's a really smart dude. And so we sent these invoices out, and there were no, and I'm going, maybe they're still in the mailbox, because we weren't getting any phone calls. I looked in the mailbox, they were all mailed. We got 2 phone calls, and they both said, you know what, I was kind of wondering when you were going to charge us for this stuff. And we didn't lose any customers, which kind of, what that told me about me is that I didn't give my clients enough credit for being intelligent. But then again, I did not hold myself into very high esteem either, because I was giving the stuff away. So we all have that's a thumbs up. When I hear the angels are singing, that's a big thumbs up right there. So I guess what I'm saying is that it's nerve-wracking. I mean, I quite frankly, the first time I went in to convince an existing product-oriented client to have us bill for the time, I actually perspired through my suit. I was really, really nervous. But the thing is when you're talking about objectives, when you're talking about helping them generate revenue, all of a sudden, the frame of reference is totally different. And I think I may even have a slide in there about that. This is, and you guys know all this stuff. Yes, sir.
Before you go, because I don't want to forget this, but it sounds like you're pitching and selling to entrepreneurs, business owners with this concept, which I think is great. Can you say that you've used that platform with like purchasing departments of large organizations?
Yeah, and it's important. Here's a really good example of the Minnesota lottery. As you know, all lotteries have tons of money, and they like to buy stuff. And we got us and 1,000 of our closest friends in the promotional products business got this RFP for 45,000, a dozen golf balls. You know what? Me and everybody else. So we put a little bit different twist on it. So we went to this company that was representing Ball Pro, Titleist, and I called them up and I said, hey, if we pay cash with the PO, what kind of a price will you give us? Just a minute, and I'm talking to the president immediately, and we had never even worked with these guys. So anyway, we were able to negotiate a nice discount because there was no risk. So getting back to, we put this transaction together, we ended up getting the bid, we actually did very well on it. So I was talking to Tommy B., who is the procurement guy, and I said, hey Tom, you guys can just go to Titleist and buy golf balls. And he goes, yes, I can, but he always called me Grasshopper. I don't know why. But he said, Joe, if I buy from you and something doesn't work, it's your butt, not mine. And I went, thank you very much, because now I know the value of what I'm doing for you is I'm pretty much eliminating the risk. Now here's a interesting thing. Is that because of the relationship we've been able to build with them and people at the state of Minnesota, we'll get these purchase orders for $2,499.99, like 3 or 4 of them. And that's because people can pick who they want to buy from if the deal is less than a certain amount. So that's really helped. And I'll tell you kind of like the depths of the nerdiness working with these organizations. They're going to buy a bunch of, plastic mugs or something. And so I always go in and inspect, because they have a sample from somebody and everybody shops it around. Okay. So I take a look at it, and I'm kind of an intellectual property patent nerd. So I flip the thing over, and there was a design patent on the bottom, and there was a logo of a company called Tetradyne. I looked them up, multi-billion-dollar, and I'm going, okay, so this is a licensed product that's protected by a design patent that's being manufactured by a billion-dollar company. So I'm going, okay. So I found a legitimate source, one of their subcontractors, put in the bid, and went to the bid. I was like going to the bid opening. So I go to the bid opening, and somebody came way under our bid. And I'm going, great, who cares? So I talked to Tommy B, and I said, hey, could I see, because we had to provide samples. And I said, hey, can I see that sample? And when I was holding them side by side, they were exactly the same. I flipped them over, and the one that he was going to buy did not have the design patent on it, and it didn't have the Tetradyne logo on it. When I explained to him the liability he would incur if he bought a knockoff, he just went, that's why I like doing business with you, because you bring up stuff. Because when you think about what any state of Minnesota, province of Ontario, they're buying gazillions of dollars worth of stuff, and promotional products are probably the least important thing they're going to do that year. So any of these little things, and when the trust goes up, we actually now give classes on how to prepare RFPs for embroidered clothing and silk screening, because we want the riffraff out of the deal. So you can establish really good relationships with procurement people. Quite frankly, and I don't want to offend anybody here, they're not my favorite people to work with, because they're really not into the objective part of things. But I can tell you how one way, and it's only worked once, where I was able to swim upstream, and this is a really good example of moving somebody from product to something else. The Environmental Protection Agency of State of Minnesota sent us a bid, and everybody else, for 5,000 magnets. So I'm kind of looking at it, and I called up the procurement person, and I said, I knew there was a bigger, here's the thing about a promotional products inquiry. There's a decision maker and a bigger opportunity that's hidden. That's symptomatic of someone that we really need to talk to. So I'm looking at this thing, and I was talking to her name was Gail, and I said, Gail, you know what? I've actually been doing you a disservice, because all I'm doing for you is giving you a price for some product. And also, too, I think I can help you with something, because all you're doing is buying stuff cheap. My guess is that if I spent a little time with you and helped you ask bigger questions, your boss is probably going to look at you as more of a colleague instead of like a gopher. And she said, you know what, yeah, I'll talk to you. So I just kind of took her through, what's the objective, what's the return on investment. Then I got introduced to the commissioner of environmental whatever. And then all of a sudden, we ended up selling a complete remake of all of their brochures, because they use interns. I had them lay all of their brochures and stuff out, and they were, done with interns. So we actually ended up we got no bid on redoing their collateral. And to tie this into return on investment, it was this process called in outstate Minnesota, it's too expensive to have garbage pickup. So they have 50-gallon barrels, and they just burn everything in there, and it goes up into the sky and falls on the grass, and the cows eat it. It's not a really good thing. So we helped them with this Bernie the Burn barrel. It's just like this disgusting barrel with stuff oozing out. But anyway, the bottom line is that we did a whole bunch of mailings. And what they figured is that just because they were working with the recycling companies in northern Minnesota, there was an uptick in people who were getting their trash hauled away. And based upon the number of new accounts, and then the local haulers shared this information, they believe the number of burn barrels that were discontinued because of that promotion probably saved the environment in Minnesota $10 to $15 million worth of environmental damage. And I'm really glad we did the calculation because one of the local, get those local news stations that they just want to find something so they can investigate and do all this kind of stuff. Well, they started investigating the EPA's use of promotional products. We're wasting money and stuff. And the commissioner just really was very, very polite, but just tore this person a new one, just saying, well, here's an example of your tax dollars at work. We spent $15,000 on this project, and we saved $15 million in environmental damage. So, I guess that's measurement. There's always a way to measure stuff, and that's the thing that's so exciting about it. But it'll drive you nuts. It's not easy. But here's something that you can talk to your customers about. And this is the next session, I'll talk more about this. But you guys are probably familiar with non-disclosure agreements. That means you're going to tell me secret stuff that I won't pass on, and I'm going to tell you secret stuff that I'm not going to pass on. And where non-disclosure agreements come in really, really handy is that when, talking about somebody's business, that's about as intimate as guys get. Right, guys? That's about as intimate as we get. And the cool thing about it is that when you're starting to talk about objectives, if the conversation is flowing in the right direction, I usually will stop. It sounds like going out on a date or something. But I'll stop and say, you know what, before we talk about, the secret stuff, can I sign a non-disclosure? And a lot of companies will have it, or I've got one. And you sign the non-disclosure, and here's the cool thing about it. Do you hate it when your product ideas get ripped off?
Yes.
Well, here's what a non-disclosure does. You get to write in there all the stuff that's confidential. Prices, customers, product ideas, creative ideas. And it's a mutual document. And a lot of business people sign them all the time. So they go looking through it, and they go, perfect, thank you. Trust level really goes up. And I ran into this at a law firm where I had a non-disclosure with the president of the law firm. I was out in San Diego working with some guys, and they said, hey, we need some of those pizza cutters. Great, man, I love it. Put all the information together, and I didn't, and then I didn't get an order from them, so I called them. I said, oh, there's somebody back at our office that's the husband of the gal who does the thing, whatever. And I said, that's cool, no worries. So I said, could you send me just a copy of the invoice from that company and what it is and everything? Okay, great. So I went to the president and I said, I'm not going to make a deal out of this, but our non-disclosure covers product ideas, pricing, and one of your employees violated that non-disclosure agreement. And he was really ticked off. And I said, hey, I'm not going to make a deal out of it. All I ask is that, if I'm talking to some of your employees about a project, they're not to share that information with anybody else. And he actually he emailed a copy of the non-disclosure to, he's got like 400 employees, mailed that thing out and said, here's the rules. Here's what's going to happen. So these are a lot of examples, and these things didn't happen the first day I was doing this. It's taken me about 15 years from coming up with the ideas to getting where I am now. But please, just start asking about those objectives, because you're gonna find things. Here's another example. Somebody called up, wanted to buy 1,000 pens. Now, when I was Joe the pen guy, I would have asked the 4 magic questions, and I would have gotten the order, and I would have made whatever I would have made. But I said, well, if we take a step back here, how are you going to use the pens? We're going to give them away at a trade show. Well, what kind of trade show is it? I don't know. My boss just told me to get some pens. Well, who's the audience? I don't know. Well, no, you got to just talk to my boss. Oh, cool. That's the person I want to talk to. Talk to the boss. They'd never been to a trade show, did not have a trade show booth, didn't have shirts, didn't have promotional products, didn't have sales collateral. So that was $16,000. And they hired me to work at the trade show because they'd never been to a trade show before. So if two things to take away here, aside from the fact that I wander all over the place. One thing is that when somebody calls you to buy promotional products, that's a symptom of a bigger opportunity and a decision maker who you probably want to meet as soon as possible. That's like number one. And then number two, treat promotional products as an advertising medium, and please give the medium the respect that it deserves. Because you know what, quite frankly, let me see, in Canada, I think promotional products, I think it's it's like, what, 2 billion Canadian? I think that's how big our industry is in Canada. $2 billion. I'd be willing to bet that that's more money than people spend on magazine advertising, outdoor advertising. So, I mean, we're a serious bunch of people in a serious industry. So, I'm lecturing. But here's something when you sign the non-disclosure agreement, you can start asking about, how much do you want to sell next year? Well, we want to sell another $1 million. Great. And you can work your way through here with figuring out gross margin, and you can realize, okay, so every time we bring in a customer, that's $16,500 of lifetime value. That really, you're not Joe the Pen guy when you're talking about stuff like that. So that's pretty cool. This is how, when you get nerdy on this, because we're talking about marketing measurement, to get a customer, you have to kind of take them through some steps. So I just kind of made this thing up and going, well, if a customer is worth lifetime value of $16,500, and then you can talk to your customer about, how effective are your salespeople? So if you take a look at this, like here's a customer. A qualified prospect is usually somebody who's asked for a proposal. And then prospects are people who fit the profile. And then leads, these are just people who just have filled out a contact form on a website or have called or emailed. So it's not rocket science. It's more bottle rocket science, I guess. But if you go through this process, then you can also say, you can see how much they should be willing to pay for a lead. That gets really interesting because I would really love to sell 1,000 $16.50 coffee mugs. When you think about it, if you're selective at a trade show and you're handing out the coolness, one could posit that one of those 1,000 people will probably become a customer, right? I mean, that's not unusual, or that's not crazy. So we have these discussions with our customers, and they just love it because you know what? You think about all of the untrackable media that people spend money on now. This is crazy. So this is like a break-even analysis. And then and we have these discussions with them too, is that what kind of a return on investment do you want to get on your promotional product spend or your marketing spend? And if they say we want to get 100% return, well, then you just do the math a little differently. So it's like, so now that's $8,250 worth of coffee mugs when you calculate in what the return is. And if you decide you want to get involved in selling other media, I mean, this also works really well. You think about direct mail. Can you imagine how cool a 1,000-piece mailing would be that you sell for $8,250? Could you imagine what you could do with $8? Holy crap. So this is why I'm an excitable boy. But when you start approaching things like this, especially when you're working with small businesses, the cool thing about small businesses is if you approach them like this, and there's no flim-flam stuff here at all of a sudden, they're going to come up with $8,000. I have never, ever, within the last 15 years, I've never asked anybody what their budget was. And that's because when you're talking to a senior person or an owner, they don't have budgets for stuff like this. They make these decisions. Okay, I'm going to buy this piece of equipment. That's going to get me this. I'm going to do this, it's going to get me that. This is the kind of stuff that they do all day long. And the cool thing about it is that people that have decent money really like $8.25 coffee mugs. I mean, they think they're really cool. So that's the thing I find to be really exciting about this, but it all goes back to asking
Excuse me.
what their objectives are.
Hold on. I'm sorry, I'm missing something.
Oh, no.
Where did you find that $8.25? Where
Oh,
did you
oh.
get that?
Yeah, well, I had to have my son help me with the math on this. But if the lifetime value of a customer is $16,500,
Uh-huh.
and if they want to double their money on the advertising effort, so that's where we got the $82.50 down here. So it's if a customer is worth $16.5, they would be willing to spend $82.50 to get a new customer. So they would, in essence, double their money.
Okay, so you're saying the desired ROI of 100% is that's the end result, right?
Yeah,
So they're willing to spend $82.50
To get a customer.
$16.50.
Yeah, something like that.
Is that common? Do you think that's common, that people would spend half of the value?
No, I have people that are willing to spend 75%.
Yeah.
I mean, and that's the cool thing about having these, quite frankly, these intimate discussions, having a non-disclosure agreement, and all of a sudden, you're on their side of the table. This is not, it's win-win. That's the thing that's exciting. And did I do a decent job answering that question, by the way? Because sometimes I don't. So these are, now this is kind of more of the hardcore but easier stuff. For those, we did emails, to promote ourselves, and I think probably most of us do this. What we started doing is we started selling email services. And you can just use the same software you're using for yourself. But the cool thing about this is, and this is why it's great to have a non-disclosure, as a client going to share a 59,000 name email list with Joe the Pen Guy? Of course not. Joe the Pen Guy wouldn't want to do with it. But this is a platform that we happen to use, and we report on this with our customers all the time just to say, okay, well, this is how many we sent. That's how many people opened. That's how many people, that bad email addresses. And then that's how many people click through. So what that tells me is that there are 217 people who are very interested in the offer that we had. Although it's less than 0.5%, that is a huge amount of money because the average lifetime value of these customers are $100,000 a year US. So, and then it has other things we can see the products that they were interested in, which has something to do with the content, of course. Now, here's the thing. The hardest, people, what do you figure? People don't like to speak in public, and I think people are even more afraid of writing than they are of speaking in public. And how many of our clients have the best intention of sending out a monthly newsletter, but they never do it because nobody wants to write? So we found a little niche. Before we would hire people to do these, and you just mark them up. Actually, you can get better margins marking up other people's time than you can on promotional products. Now, don't stop selling promotional products. But the thing is, you are all smart enough to figure out what the objectives are, how to reach them, and think of your network. Think about all these people that you know who are great people that you'd love to do business with. And you become the general contractor. The dude that bought our house, I saw him operate a hammer, and I had to take it away from him. But you know what? Joe and Katie, what are your objectives for your house? Oh, well, it's the salesperson, and then they subcontract the work and make sure everything's cool, and then mark it up. It's like, how many of us imprint mugs? Probably not a lot of us. But when you think about, functionally, there really is not a big difference between selling $10,000 worth of mugs versus $10,000 worth of website. Because you take the order, you find someone to do it, you send that to them. There's more involved, of course, because there's a lot of objectives you have to meet. But you're just marking it up and you're selling it. And that's what we do with coffee mugs and golf balls and all that other stuff. So this is a very formal way of measuring. And these are actually real statistics from real customers. Now, yeah, cover your left eye, right? This is the marketing mix that we're working here. So we've got trade shows, we've got online advertising. And the exciting thing about that, I love having the year-end meetings. What we're able to do is, this happens to be Google AdWords, which we do that kind of work. But we're able to say, this is how much revenue we brought in to your company based upon the leads that were generated from this. And that's really cool. And the neat thing about it is we're like this with these guys. Let me ask you a question. If I was selling $1.1 million of promotional products to him, how susceptible would he be to somebody say, oh, I can do that for $750,000? Really susceptible. But if somebody came to him and said, oh, I could deliver you $1.1 million worth of sales for half that, half what you're paying those guys, he's going to go, I don't think so. So when you start making objectives happen for people, the relationship totally changes, because it's not about what it costs them. It's about the relationship and what you are delivering. Now, you may, with promotional products, if you're doing direct mail for somebody, you may be only delivering a small portion, but you're still part of the mix. And you can learn more about how they're doing things. And quite frankly, in today's day and age, we're all getting so busy, we want to work with as few people as possible. And what's happened to us is that here's a big difference between selling promotional products and then doing what we're doing, is that if somebody's in a company and they're buying promotional products from you and they leave, the chance is, maybe 50-50 that you're going to lose the business. Now, if you're really lucky, you're going to keep the business, and then you're going to do business with that person at their new company. That's like the best thing. Now, what's happening with our company is when we're doing the marketing stuff, and what we do, you know how we sell promotional products? I'll go in and pitch a company, and then, yeah, man, that's great. Yeah, we're going to sign you. You're going to be our agency. And these are like, $1-2 million companies, so it's not like, DuPont or anything like that. Kind of as in passing, I'll go, oh, do you guys buy any stuff in like this logo stuff? Do you guys buy any of that? Yeah, I do. I don't know where we get it. Well, that's an advertising medium, and we should really do that for brand consistency. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Yeah, we'll just start buying that stuff from you. Hey, could you bring the person in who is your go-to person to buy that stuff? And then just let's introduce us, and then just let him or her know that we're now the source, because we're your ad agency. Now we are going to be the source for all your promotional products. Oh, yeah, no problem. Person comes in, when they get the news, they are pissed. Because all of a sudden, brother, sister, uncle, whatever, totally taken out of the deal. And unfortunately for me, I had that happen, 23 years ago. All of a sudden, well, my boss decided that we're going to go with somebody else. I didn't know what was happening. I was not talking to the boss. So that's how we sell stuff. Oh, yeah, do you do that kind of stuff? Yeah, we'll do. Okay, that's fine. And I think about how hard I would have to work to get a $1,000 mug order. And this way, I ended up getting like an $18,000 food order. So the CFO was in this meeting, and he goes, oh, yeah, do you guys do food gifts? Yeah, pretty much, yeah. Yeah, I got this list of people, and it was a really nice program, and he just said, here, handle it. It's just, life is really, really different when you come at it from, and I'm glad that I learned the hard way, because you guys don't have to. That's why I like doing the speaking stuff. So anyway, and this is more measurement stuff. There's measurement tools. Google Analytics is free. And really what that is that tells people the truth about what's happening on their website relative to people who are coming in that want to identify themselves. And I'm actually not going to go too much farther. I mean, that's it gets nerdier after this. What I would rather do is, if I can answer some questions, or even better, I'm sure that some of you have insights, because you know what? As smart as I may think I am, I don't know everything. And my guess is that there are those of you who probably know a lot about this stuff and maybe would make some comments. So I'd like to open the floor for comments, and then I'll repeat the questions so the folks at home can learn that. But anything's fair game. So questions, comments, whatever. And then I'll stick around. I mean, I got another session after this. I'll stick around, but I'll stay and talk to you guys as long as you want me to talk to you guys. Yes, sir.
You made a comment when you were initially presenting the dentist scenario.
Mm-hmm.
You created the card with the bite out of the card.
Yeah.
And then you made this statement. You said, I crossed my fingers and toes
Yeah.
and hoped for the best.
Right.
Now, that I'm assuming was probably early on in your years of doing this marketing stuff, correct? Am I correct? No? Yes?
I cross my fingers and toes every time. I guess
So the reason why I asked that question is because I'm assuming that you really don't want to be crossing your fingers and toes every time you give someone a package or a concept. Mm-hmm. Okay, I think this is going to work. Should there not be a threshold point in time where you say, you know what, Mr. Customer, this is a trusted way to go. And if you buy this from me, it's going to give you some great results. And I don't have to cross my fingers and toes.
Right. The question was, you made a statement about crossing your fingers and toes when you sent out the first direct mail piece for your dentist. And in the back of my mind, I knew that the return, usually the response rate on something like that when it's a higher dollar thing is like 1%. So I knew that it was going to work, but I don't promise things. What I do is I say, this is what I think could happen, and this is where the statistics come from, and the creative is really strong. But you know what, with the world, I mean, it's really difficult to really predict. But I tell you, when he came back 4 days later waving that card around, that just kind of validated what I had already known. But I guess I'm not pessimistic. I just care so much about my clients that I just don't want to, I want everything to work for them. And I think that's what it was more, I didn't want to disappoint them. And there's always that possibility that things might not. I'm a really optimistic person, and in my heart, I knew that this was going to be great for him. And it turned out being really, really good. But I was crossing my fingers and toes because he's a friend of mine, and it was more emotional. But I had confidence in the process, or else I wouldn't have told him about it. I wouldn't have done it. So thank you for asking me, because I wasn't really clear. Yes, sir.
I think one thing that really negates what he's talking about, I found it really interesting when you were talking about the golf balls, and how you said to the gentleman, well, you're relatively large, you could go to Titleist or whoever, you could buy the golf balls directly from them. What we're doing is we're building relationships. And his response was, well, yes, I could, but if anything goes south or goes wrong, it's on my head. And big corporations do have things go south.
Yep.
COOs do it. CEOs, Victor Kayam in his book was offered the worldwide rights to Velcro. And he asked all his marketing gurus, all his vice presidents, all his people, should I take this? And every single one said no. And his gut feeling was that he should. And he said it was one of the worst decisions he ever made in his whole life. So sometimes these big corporations and mid-sized, they have all these experts around, but they're not willing to, when we build the relationship, so if anything goes wrong, it comes back on us and not them.
Well, the question was, I made the comment about the golf ball deal and the director of purchasing saying, well, the reason why I do business with you is because if something goes south, it's your butt, not mine. But that was like the first, we were building this relationship of trust. And the one that really cemented it was the story about he was about ready to buy a knockoff product that they would have, that would have been his butt. And because of that, what ends up happening, what I found with larger customers, is that there's always a threshold. And quite frankly, people would rather work with people they trust than people they don't. Now, sometimes, if you can save a lot of money, maybe you're going to work with somebody you don't trust. as much. So that's the thing where we see the results of building trust with people who are in the procurement function, which generally speaking, you don't assume that they're gonna do anything about other than getting the lowest bid. But what we have found, as I was talking about, the symptom of trust is when you start getting these $2,499 POs for stuff that you didn't even know about. And we've even had situations where we've had award and incentive program where the procurement department ended up, they did a reverse auction on it, and we just refused to participate in it. And our customers in that company were so upset that they weren't able to work with us that all of a sudden we started seeing like handwritten POs and emails with credit card, like personal business credit card numbers. So what they were doing is they were actually expensing. I mean, they talked to their boss and said, we don't want to work with these new yahoos. We want to work with Scott and Associates. So, oh yeah, just put those watches and clocks, just put that on your credit card, and then we'll just expense it. So, I mean, that's kind of what happens. So it's,
Just one more question.
yeah.
You find with procurement, because I've done not a lot of this, but I've done a little bit, and I found that the first time you put the bid in, it was a lot of work. But a year later or 6 months later, when they wanted to reorder, we ended up getting the order again and again and again and again, and it was almost like it came to the point where you knew you were going to get the order no matter what you put on the paper, because again, it's relationship building, and the buyers must have felt comfortable or something.
Yeah, that's a good example about you go and you work on a bid or something, request for quote or something like that, and we get this a lot where you're competitive, you do the right things, you end up getting the order. And it's pretty common, just like you were saying, sir, is that we'll get phone calls like this. Hey, you did that golf ball order for us last year. Can you do it for the same price? Let me see what I can do. And then you go out to have lunch, walk around. And then, yeah, I can do it. And zing, here's another purchase order. Yes, sir.
Yeah, well, unfortunately, there's the other side of procurement where that doesn't happen. And when we've gone through that, I'm sure a lot of people in this audience here today have gone through that, where procurement will go out for the RFQs, and they are going to the lowest bidder. When people who are sometimes just new to the business or whatever, and are selling on price.
Yep.
So, and it has happened quite a lot with us in the last 5-6 years. Of an organization who at one time had probably over 30 contacts in that organization, now down to about 6 or 7, because they're just simply going for the lowest bid.
Yeah.
How do you counteract that? And like trying to get to the big cheese, so to speak, ain't going to happen.
Well, it's really difficult. I mean, there's certain organizations, and the question is that how do you deal with like the product-oriented commodity purchasing people? And sometimes they won't see the light and don't want to see the light. And, in my opinion, I think they're doing an organization a disservice by buying the cheapest stuff. And it's really interesting because people who are responsible for objectives, like marketing and sales and that kind of stuff, they get fired pretty fast if they don't deliver results. And it's almost like people who are buying for the lowest price, they say, well, you told me I had to get the cheapest thing. It's not my problem that there's a recall on your McNugget, whatever things. It's not my fault, So I just find it's a lot easier to work with people whose pretty much their butts are on the line, at least on a monthly or quarterly basis, to produce results. And I spent a fair amount of time, playing the RFP game and that kind of stuff. And we don't do a lot of it anymore because our model has changed and we're working with smaller organizations. But yeah, if you're doing a lot of sales to larger organizations and going through the request for proposal standpoint, sometimes you're just stuck, doing it that way. So, ma'am, you had a question? Okay, so somebody saw.
I didn't. I forgot what I was going to ask.
Well, I can answer that question. You want me to give you an answer to the question you forgot? I can do that. Yes, ma'am.
In the meantime, I'm going to write that down.
I wanted to ask you, when you made that switch and you started billing for your services,
Mhm.
did you lose a certain percentage of your customers? You said it was quite
No.
straightforward.
Yeah, to repeat the question, when you started billing for your time, did you lose any customers? And we didn't. And what had happened is I'd gotten my, actually I got my CAS. And I was going, yeah, I got my merit badge. And it was like, well, what am I going to do with it? And then that's where, talking to my colleagues, they said, well, geez, you should bill for your time, because there are people that I knew, a guy named Bruce Felber, who's a really great guy. And I thought, this is the lever that I have. And the first guy, and this guy, like an auto parts wholesaler, just coarse, rough. I want a smoking deal every time. I mean, do we have clients like that? Yeah, of course we do. And so I said, I got something pretty exciting to tell you. I'm going to go in and talk to you. And he goes, what, are you taking me out for a beer? Well, no, I have a professional designation now. And I explained to him the CAS, and I think it was 75 hours of class and writing papers and all this kind of stuff. And he said, you mean to tell me you spent 75 hours in class to learn how to put logos on pens? And I said, absolutely, and I'll tell you why. And I said, here's the deal. In our industry, there's about 27 different substrates: plastic, fleece, polo shirts, all this. There's a couple dozen of those, and then there's about an equal number of different imprinting methods. Oh, I didn't know that. And I can tell you right now, there's only 3 substrates and 4 imprinting methods that are going to do justice to your logo. That's why I went to class. And I said, have you ever, yay! and I didn't, that just came out of my mouth. And I think there's dead salespeople that are just floating around and they feed us these perfect answers. It just came out of my mouth. But I was all excited, and I could have gotten offended. And I think some of you guys kind of started to get a little offended when I started talking about that. But it just came out of my mouth, and he went, yeah, you know what? I've gotten some, he said, hey, look at this. And it was some crappy embroidery. And he said, your logo cannot be embroidered. And he got it. So, I mean, that was the thing that kind of gave me I'm a fairly confident guy, but I had painted myself into a corner by being Joe the pen guy, basically. And I was really surprised that we didn't lose any customers. And some of them were just kind of, like I was saying, well, duh. My ad agency, my attorney, my accountant, they all bill me for my time, and why aren't you? Because the thing is, when you think about whether it's a TAS or a CAS or an MAS or an MAS plus, think about the people we call on. I think the insurance folks, they have more letters after their names, like CLU and CFC and all that kind of stuff. But engineers, attorneys, we service business people have professional designations. And this is important. And I get kind of bold on this thing, and I say, well, who are you buying your promotional products from now? Because there's some people I just sell promotional products to. They're not interested in the advertising stuff. Well, do you have their card? I have like a promotional products business card and an advertising business card. So why are you wasting your time with this person? I get kind of nasty. And then I explain my professional designation, what I went through. And some of them just go, well, it's my brother and I have to. Oh, sorry. But some people, they're digging it. They're going, now tell me more, tell me more. So you guys, just like Mr. Cooper was saying beforehand, you're like the top of the top. And the interesting thing about the relationship that we all have with each other is we're actually not competitors, we're colleagues. And I'll tell you how crazy it gets in my world. There's a friend of mine who has a distributorship in Dallas, and his biggest customer is in Minneapolis. I make sales calls for him on his customer in Minneapolis because he can't afford to be, going up every month. And then I have customers in Dallas, and he makes sales calls for me in Dallas. And it's all, really what it is, it's all about trust. And quite frankly, some people are going to mess with you, and you get burned every once in a while. But I'm a karma dude, and it seems to have worked out pretty well for me. And I think, have I burned through the entire time, and is it dinner? Is it time for dinner? Did I just use up my other one? Well, anyway, hopefully you actually got what you came for. Did you? Did you actually learn all the spewing stuff? Okay, that's cool. And Cliff would have done a better job, by the way. I just want to let you know that. But I'm going to I got another session, I think 15 minutes. I'm going to hang out here if you guys got questions or comments or something. And if you want cards, call me, please. Please call me. I will take as much time as you need to help you, because this is really like cut the top of the head off and pull the brain out and twist it and shove it back in. It was tough for me, and it's probably going to be kind of tough for you guys too. So anyway, I'm going to go over here.